Yeah, we taking it away, Roger?
You're taking it away.
Well, okay, welcome everybody. Again, hopefully we'll be able to meet in person here shortly. So for the first hour, we are honored actually to have Debra Johnson with us, the RTD's general manager. We really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us. And Roger, you sent Debra a bunch of questions that we had created at the last meeting. We did that quite purposely so that you had some time to think about some of the questions we had. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Debra, and you can give an introduction of yourself, I suppose. And you can take those questions in any order you'd like. And I think as you do each one, if members of the committee have some follow-up questions, that would be great. And if we have some time at the end for some additional questions, that would be great as well. So again, thanks so much for joining us. We very much appreciate it. And please take it away.
I might add, Debra, it's not an interrogation, and we recognize you may not have answers to some of this or want to just pass over some of them. I think even in the notes there, we anticipated one of them would be something you wouldn't even want to touch. So we get that, and if there's other things you want to talk about also, of course, just jump in.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Greetings to all of you. It's my pleasure to join you, and I appreciate the invitation. And first and foremost, a little bit about me. As introduced, I am the General Manager and CEO. I have now been in this role for a year now. I celebrated my first anniversary just last week, and it's been interesting to say the least. Moving across, well, not across country, but moving, to this region in the midst of a pandemic, doing everything virtually, still have yet to have the opportunity to fully acclimate myself as I have done previously when I've moved for different roles and positions. But needless to say that I am delving right in, and utilizing formats such as this enables me to accommodate a lot more meetings. So there's always a silver lining in reference to being able to be agile and flexible. Just a little bit about me. I pride myself on being a person in the people business. I really see public transportation as being the great societal equalizer, unleashing people from their limitations, because really and truly, as we look at, having a step up in life, access to opportunity, be it public transportation, provides that, step up on that rung when you're looking to aspire educationally or job purposes and things of the like. And that really is my ultimate why, in the sense of why I'm in the public transportation arena. I'm approaching my 30th year in this space come 2022. I've had the opportunity to work in a myriad of different agencies, but also have had the opportunity to hone my skill set as relates to ultimate transit service delivery, starting my career basically on the government relations and legislative advocacy side. I was one that wanted to lean in and engage what it was I was advocating for. So that enabled me to quickly learn about daily operations, being involved with capital projects early on in my career in the 90s. I spent most of my time in the San Francisco Bay Area, I would say, coupled with a stint for about 5 years working at WMATA, DC Metro, going back to the Bay Area, and then going down to Southern California, where I spent time at 2 different agencies, being LA Metro and Long Beach Transit, and then I'm here. But I too have worked in the private sector, and that's how I catapulted in this public arena. So with that as a quick introduction, I really want to focus more on the questions that you all provided me, so we can engage and have some dialogue. And I will take that first question, even though I think that you guys didn't think I would dibble and dabble in this. As I talk about me starting my career, I'd be remiss to say that while I started at what used to be this engineering firm called CH2M Hill, that later became Booz Allen, that then later was absorbed, as you know, in the greater aspect. I believe, was it WSP that did it too? That was Parker.
It was. Yeah.
It was, right? WSP has gobbled up everything, right? So with that, I went to BART. and I was doing government relations for BART for some capital projects, notably the BART extension to SFO, the San Francisco National Airport. The reason I broached that is because BART is one of the 3 agencies that has a board directly elected by a constituency, the other being AC Transit in the Bay Area as well. So when we talk about a change of governance, I really firmly believe it's not about governance per se, because whether you have a board that is directly elected by a constituency, whether they assume a seat of a transit board member due to the fact that they hold another position. And I'm sorry, you guys, I'm going to close my Outlook because this thing keeps dinging and it's driving me bonkers. Okay, there we go. Or whether, you have a community-based board that's appointed by an elected official, be it a mayor, a county administrator, and then confirmed collectively by, a board of supervisors, a board of county executives, or a city council. I think basically what we're getting to is the overarching aspect of policy versus administration, the day-to-day transit service delivery, and then more specific, what I think as relates to governance here within this region in which we are all located. We have this exorbitant service area, expansive service area, maybe that's a better adjective. And we tout that's 2,342 square miles, but within those 2,342 square miles, we have disparate operating environments. And then we have 15 districts. And there is this notion that I want what this person wants, and we use, equity and equality as if they're interchangeable terms. And so as we think about it holistically, if we're really looking to create a cohesive transportation network, we need to first look at what we're trying to provide and what we qualify as being a comprehensive transportation network. Just looking to say X has that there and I need it as well, we need to discern what might be optimal to provide connectivity to a certain area. And if we haven't had an investment in infrastructure, meaning there's not safe paths of travel, if they're not safe, the sidewalks to safely, traverse, does it really make sense to have a bus stop, every block when it doesn't exist as we go forward? So to answer your question more succinctly with having that as a backdrop, I really think as we talk about governance as relates to the regional transportation district, first we have to discern what might be optimal in reference to having a service area. Would it be more optimal for this to basically emulate the key word in the moniker of this district being regional? Or should we focus more closely on a different type of model? Would it be more conducive to have localized services that then would connect with RTD to bring people into the centralized core of the region? So that's my response there. Does that make sense to you all? Okay. All right. Any feedback? I'm open to that because this is a conversation.
Dialogue, yes.
Yeah, dialogue with Debra. I've had one today with employees. I'm having one with y'all. So I'm totally amenable and flexible. Okay. All right. So
a second. I'll just say, since you actually took on, in a way, good for you, almost the harder question in governance, which is the district's size and, working in partnerships. And we've talked about that a bunch on this committee. It's kind of one of the later questions. So bravo for you for raising that. But I think this committee, I don't know where the board is, but I think this committee is quite interested in the concept of more partnerships with local governments, local entities, where they provide some more of the local service. RTD provides more of the, quote, regional and connectivity service. How you get from here to there and how you allocate funding and deal with existing expenditures is, of course, anybody's guess. So since you were brave enough to raise it, do you have any thoughts on that? Or is it just, that's a really a little too early to go there?
not really. And I pride myself on being a courageous leader. I believe closed mouths don't get fed. So if you want to eat, you have to open your mouth. And so with that, I think if anything, the optimal word here is being courageous. We often, as human beings, are so reluctant to step into that sea of change. And I said this earlier when I was speaking to my team, and it's something I say all the time, that you cannot spell the word challenge without the word change. That's literally and figuratively. You cannot spell the word challenge without the word change. And so as we talk about being the trusted leader in mobility that's incorporated into RTD's vision, we aspire to do that. We're going to have to do things differently. And Matt, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to segue into something else. There's another question that asked me for an update on our operator shortage, right? So as we talk about being all things to all entities, and everybody is putting money in and are quick to say, I'm a taxpayer and I'm doing A, B, and C, and then basically we can fill out the remaining 23 letters in the 26-letter alphabet. The point of the matter is that there perhaps hasn't been a willingness to accept that we can't be all things to all people because we have limitations. And in doing so, when we have conversations about optimizing service or our transit service delivery model, we are providing services in some areas that don't yield a return on investment because we are expending more dollars to put that bus on the street. When I'm talking about from soup to nut, what it costs to maintain a transit vehicle that can range anywhere from about $500,000 to close to $1 million contingent upon its propulsion system. Then I'm talking about having people to keep that asset in a state of good repair. I'm talking about having dispatchers to deploy that bus. I'm talking about street supervisors to manage it. Then I'm talking about the operator. So when we talk about what it is that we need to do, looking at it through that lens and recognizing the revenue service hours that entail one to deliver transit service, you will see that we are providing an exorbitant amount of service and are working at a deficit with this expansive service area. So when we talk about partnerships going forward, we have to be earnest in reference to what that is in relationship to providing more localized services through a partnership if that's deemed to be the appropriate model. One thing for everyone's edification, you know, having spent, I would say, since I was in LA only 8 years, DC 5 years, and I've been in this place for 30 years, do the math, the majority of my time has been in the Bay Area, and in just the San Francisco Bay Area itself, there are close to 30 transit agencies. And I'm talking about heavy rail, commuter rail, ferries, rubber tire, trolley coaches, historic streetcars. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but there's that connectivity because we would come together and talk utilizing the MPO, there being the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, to garner a better understanding what are the services that were provided. The Bay Area Rapid Transit District was just that, providing, you know, access into San Francisco. That was the city's core, or the region's core at the time. But you can live in different portions of the Bay Area and still basically be able to get localized bus service to get you to that BART station, so then you could get over to the city, as we refer to San Francisco as. And you had that around the Bay Area. The same thing is true in Los Angeles County in of itself. While people want to talk about LA Metro, I worked there, but then I worked at the second largest transit agency down there, being Long Beach Transit, which is a misnomer because it serves 2 counties and 13 cities, and also has water taxi service. And so as we talk about this, really, what is it we're looking to do? Because one thing that I fully didn't realize in coming to this area is that for all intents and purposes, RTD is the transit agency. There's others in the state. I don't want to, you know, sound as if I'm devaluing those, but it was lost on me until I became more engaged and did more research, that there's one transit agency for all intents and purposes. And that's something throughout the course of my career, even being in DC, there's other, you know, localized services and commuter rail services that brings people into the capital city. So with that going forward, yes, I do think there's an opportunity for partnerships, but really, what does that mean holistically? Or should we step back and look at a potential solution of how we optimize mobility throughout the region, with RTD serving as that regional connector? Did that answer your question, Matt?
Well, it's a good start.
Okay.
I'll just ask, does anybody else in our group have kind of a follow-up thought or question? I mean, this has been a big topic for us, and certainly it's a big topic for the Reimagine project, I am sure, which we've been involved in. Anybody else have any thoughts on this before Debra moves on to another question? Come on.
Okay, so there was a question as it relates to an update on our operator shortage, and then it says relationship with the union. So I want to manage people's expectations. Everybody's quick to talk about shortages with operators, but recognizing we're in the Great Resignation, and there were 4.4 million people that left their jobs in August, and then 4.3 million people that left their jobs in September. The whole country is short staffed right now, and we see that collectively. I mean, with the supply chain issues, you patronize, a local restaurant, you will see they're looking for wait staff, cooks, it runs the gamut, hosts and hostesses and things of the like. It's no different for RTD. Even if we were able to get in operators, we still are short recruiters in our human resources ranks. And so this is an issue that's compounded. And as we talk about where we are collectively, we do have substantial vacancies. As I, was looking through the questions that I received yesterday and looked at this just collectively, as relates to our bus operators, for instance, we have budgeted in fiscal year 2021, 952 bus operators, and we have 154 vacancies, and that basically is a vacancy ratio of nearly, 17%. Customarily in this industry, you could see a vacancy rate of about 5 to 8%. As relates to our light rail operations, we have 192 positions budgeted, and this is as of October, as I stated before. And we have 25 vacancies there. And so we're looking at a 13% vacancy. But keeping in mind, those are the individuals that are operating this mass transit equipment. However, we are in a place where we don't have maintainers, mechanics, and things of the like. So without the full complement, we can have as many operators as we want, but if we don't have assets in a state of good repair for them to pull out, we're still in a precarious position. And so a statement was made here, relationship with the union. I pride myself on having good relationships with every union where I've worked. You can't spell union without you and I. And so, you like my joke? You and I? Thank you. Somebody laughed. Okay. So in all seriousness, as we talk about where we are with the union, as I tell members on my team, let's keep in mind the only reason that we have members of the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1001 here is because they're RTD employees. And so changing that mindset that we're working toward the same cause, and we are, and as the union president has said to me, he says, we're two sides of one face. And so I recognize that there could have been some relationships that were slightly scarred. But I have come into this agency and I make it a point to go out to the union hall. I have regular engagements myself with the union leadership. And I think that's very important as we go forward. Recognizing that they too understand in a crystallized fashion where we are with labor shortages. We have to partner as we look to source candidates because it's imperative for both of us, as we talk about being two sides to one face. The next question, is there any follow-up? And I'll just stop. So if anybody wants to jump in, please do so.
Debra, this is John Fusa from way down in Parker, town of Parker.
Okay.
Just on the operator aspect, no doubt we're in the middle of the Great Resignation. Labor markets have been completely disrupted all across the board. Is there an opportunity for partnerships and in terms of workforce development to generate candidates to fill those open operators or additional workforce development with the union, kind of with with local schools to generate a stream of candidates now and into the future to help meet the need and the shortage?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. It's a very good one. And yes, most certainly there are. Engaged with Denver Public Schools just last June as we had conversations about certain curricula that could be developed, especially as we look to fill difficult positions like mechanics, diesel mechanics, and things of the like. Also a partner with local community colleges, and this has been put on hold. Some of it has due to the fact of the pandemic. So I want to manage expectations. And I want to answer your questions as much as I can, but I will preface my further responses by saying that we are in the midst, we have a collective bargaining agreement that sunsets February 28th, 2022. And I pride myself on working in collaboration with the union and in good faith. And with that as a backdrop, recognizing that bargainable terms with the CBA include, wages, benefits, working conditions, and work rules. I cannot delve into specifics relative to that. So I just want you to understand that. But yes, there are a myriad of things underway, specifically as relates to opportunities that may be abound with our union partners. Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm. And Ben, I see your hand up.
Yeah, actually, I was going to bring up the CBA because I knew that was in the process, and that does make it difficult for you to talk about a lot of details. But there was I'm on the advisory committee for Reimagine, and this came up today, and a very eloquent statement was made by Ron. Is it Ron Short?
Ron Short, he's the vice
Yeah,
president
right.
of ATU Local 1001.
And just about when he joined the union, say 20 years ago, it was being an operator was a big deal.
Mhm.
And it was an important kind of job to have. And it was a career-oriented job. And it was a job that you sort of signed up for life. And that he was very eloquent in talking about the need to just look at the kind of the dignity around the job and looking at operators as more than just expendable parts to the operation. And I just wanted to really pass that along to the committee because I thought it was very helpful to think in those terms. And I imagine that comes up in your bargaining agreement discussions and probably in human resources is how can you make the job more than just a job and maybe get back to what Ron was talking about, where it's a kind of a dignified job, if you will.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that, Ben. And that's something that I hold to be true in reference to our frontline operators, because without them, there's no need for me. And they're helping to shape the opinions, perception, and attitudes of the Regional Transportation District. And that's a daunting responsibility.
Right.
Because basically when folks talk about RTD, it's very analogous to patronizing, a retail establishment. When you don't receive that certain level of customer service, it's not that I'm never going back to see Ben Bryan. I'm never going back to Target again because they're horrible, right? And so that's why I intentionally use the term operator, because a driver is just driving a vehicle. An operator is basically creating an experience for a customer. And Ron and I have had those conversations because it's something that I bring with me from my past experience and working, here at RTD. We have one labor union that represents multiple classifications. As I shared with my experience, I've worked at the City and County of San Francisco, the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency. I had 26 unions in that organization. And so as we look at this holistically, we have to be empathetic to individuals' pain points so we can garner an understanding of what it is and how we collectively solve a problem. So I appreciate you broaching that, because it's something in my short time here that I have garnered through my interactions And I have learned that whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, that there was this relationship that evolved whereby we can't talk to them because they're in the union. I'm thinking, what kind of malarkey is that? We're all colleagues. We all have a job to do, and there's interdependencies. And when we think about that collectively, that changes the narrative about what it is, getting back to Ron's statement about the sense of pride relative to being an operator. And in doing so with our strategic plan, having those 6 values where we talk about, respect and trustworthiness and the collaboration and employee ownership and diversity. All of that comes full circle in the passion that one possesses for doing their job. So thank you for broaching that. Anything else from anybody before I go on to the next question? Okay. So there's a statement here, decision not to mandate overtime. Is that helping with retention? So for me, coming to this organization and talking about valuing, all members of the team collectively, I have to tell you that I was slightly taken aback that we were mandating overtime. And this basically is a clear-cut nexus to when we talk about the service area and trying to be all things to all entities. Because we were mandating overtime because we needed people to deliver services. And let me be clear in my statement. I know coming into this organization, as it relates to the current season we're in, being football season, and there was the Broncos ride. And as I went through historical documents and I learned about this, that, and the other, a lot of these services started because there wasn't a viable rail link to get to the stadium, and these things still continue. And it's my understanding through my historical analysis that we were placing a greater emphasis on getting people to special events and requiring people to work in excess of 6 days a week to make that happen. And recognizing in a unionized environment, there is seniority, the first hired basically have the least amount of seniority. So we're hiring people and we're bringing them in and we're telling them you can't have a day off. I've spoken with individuals, and even the union president shared with me, he can recall a time where he worked and it was in excess of 3 months before he had a day off. We're not in we're not, in the midst of slavery or indentured servitude. And that makes no sense because we're putting ourselves in a precarious position as we talk about risk and exposure to the agency collectively. And so getting back, whether or not it's helping with retention is hard to discern, recognizing we're in the midst of the Great Resignation. So it's too premature to, evaluate that at this time. The next question, have we looked at raising hourly rate for operators? I'll be the first to tell you that the wages that are current for operators and for most of our frontline staff are not competitive. That's what I will say there in reference to what I outlined before, bargaining in good faith, and I don't need an unfair labor practice. Moving forward, what is my view of the agency as a benchmark against peer agencies, right? And this is something that I find to be interesting. So whoever submitted it could feel free to clarify, because one thing's for certain, when we use the term peer agencies, I never know what that means. And I say that because here we are, we run commuter rail. We do that with a third party through a concessionaire agreement. We run our commuter rail as if we run light rail in reference to headways. We have a light rail operation and we have fixed bus operation, and then we have paratransit service, and we have an element of microtransit. And then we're quick to tout that we have a service area of 2,342 square miles and that we have a 3.08 million person population of which we can serve. So when we talk about peer agencies, I don't necessarily know what that means. Are we talking about peer agencies in relationship to what the size of our budget is? Are we talking about a peer agency in the size of what our fixed route bus fleet is? So I give that all to say to you, I'm not certain what that means, but what we are doing as relates to our strategic planning effort as we go forward, we're trying to create a baseline of which you're probably aware and utilizing a net promoter score. And in doing so, we want to benchmark ourselves against other agencies and industries as a whole as it relates to excelling in customer excellence. We want to ensure that we will have individuals that are promoters of the service. How likely are you to refer RTD to your friend or loved one? And so getting back to the benchmarking against a peer agency, I would say if you're looking at governance and the structure of the board, there's only 2 peers being BART and AC since they're directly elected by a constituency. In reference to being the only transit agency in a metro region, you know, that's something that could, you know, garner different peer agencies as well. So whoever submitted the question, if you want to expound, I'm more than happy, and I'll try to address the question. Not to put anybody on the spot.
Anyone?
This is Joanna. I don't know that that's actually the question I submitted, but I'm often asking staff and folks who present to us, what do other transit agencies do in such and such circumstance?
I see. Okay.
It needs to be different, many different things, but it's nice to know what everybody else is doing.
Yes, I agree. And thank you so much, Joanna. So now I can delve deeper and answer your question. So yes, quite naturally, as we look at the fair study and equity analysis, you know, having come into this organization, and as I said, I've been in this space almost 30 years, it was hard for me to figure out how much I needed to pay to come downtown when I flew into Den, right? And so basically, as we look at our fare structure, for instance, that's a big part of what we're going to do with the consultant. We want them to look at the other models because we have these concentric circles utilizing Union Station as the focal point, saying this is where the crow flies, we're going to do this, but then we don't have a closed system. And for those of you that may not be familiar, what I mean is that, you know, we don't have fare gates where you're tapping in and tapping out, so we can, you know, base it upon, you know, the distance in which you're traveling, right? And so quite naturally, we want to look at different transit agencies to see what they've done when they don't have when they have an open system. More specifically, as we talk about Reimagine RTD, which I qualify as a comprehensive operational analysis, it's what transit agencies usually do every 7 to 10 years to discern, you know, are they serving people in the most efficient manner? Are they taking people where they need to go when they need to get there? Let's look at other transit agencies that have leveraged the COA, so we can figure out how they restructured. So when we talk about peer agencies, yes, we need to look at those in the framework of what we need to do to leverage the lessons learned and optimize our transit service delivery models. And so we do that being members of the American Public Transportation Association. Just in my short tenure, I, you know, basically convened via APTA 2 peer reviews, one on our internal auditing practice or function, and the second being our community policing model, because there's a lot of opportunity there going forward. And so recognizing that we utilize transit agencies, and it was intentional how we use those, because I said, I want to look at systems that started out as a bus-only agency that grew and incorporated rail. So top of mind came DART, Dallas Area Rapid Transit. Top of mind came LA Metro. They did the same thing going forward, right? And so then I wanted to look at agencies that had a centralized intermodal hub like Union Station. So that basically brought into play, oh my gosh, I'm having a brain, WMATA in DC. Also LA Metro as well, because they have Union Station and Amtrak and commuter rail lines coming there from outlying areas and surrounding counties of LA. And then basically different entities that are experiencing societal issues, such as people experience homelessness and, you know, excessive drug use and, you know, crime. So basically we looked at BART, right? And they have a sworn police force, you know, a dedicated police department. So there's different factors, and that's probably me rambling, but I was trying to give you examples of how we do leverage peers as we go forward. So I hope that helped, Joanna. Okay.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Okay, great. Let's see, we're cooking with gas here. Partnership opportunities, challenges at the local level. Matt, we sort of talked about that, but one thing's for certain that I will share. I'm sorry, Danny, you have your hand up.
Thanks. I put it up as soon as you looked down, so
Oh, okay.
didn't think I'd catch you. I'm sorry. I think this is going to kind of take a step back. I'll be brief with it.
Okay.
I going back to the operator shortage and then also with the kind of peer agencies piece, one thing that I work on with the state is position descriptions and making them more welcoming, and position descriptions that sell an organization and the experience and don't necessarily weed people out, and to review them for things that are necessary and to explain things well, but in plain language. And one thing that I did was review the position description for an operator. And I don't know who writes them, if it's a team working on it, but it's interesting that it's this combination of wonky, complex language, some plain language, but inconsistent. There's some things that aren't really explained, like why people need to be able to lift 60 pounds or push 125 pounds. And if that's required, it's fine. But often there are lifting requirements, and even in my position description when I was hired by the state, that never apply to me. But if they do, then it's great. But I think adding why, if there's context for people, and I don't know, it wouldn't fix everything, of course. And you explained well, I think, some of the issues nationwide with worker shortages. But I think that's one thing I'd be curious if there was an overhaul of position descriptions to make them more, like, sell the position and experience more, use more plain language and more context in them. I'd be curious what the effect might be. And then when the partner, like peer organizations came up, I started wondering, are there other transit groups that have overhauled those, what that would be like? And I really don't know, but I'm curious.
The reason why I'm smiling is because I had an all hands meeting and we were talking about what we're doing as relates to our job descriptions. First and foremost, you know, of course, with operator positions, one may have to evacuate a bus, right? You may have to help lift a person that has a disability because one may have to leave behind a walker or a mobility device or things of the like, right? But basically, one thing's for certain, Danny, as we go forward, and I have talked about this, and Rome wasn't built in a day, is that coming in, I can teach anybody how to drive. None of us grew up knowing how to drive. I'm more focused on the interpersonal skills, your personal attributes, because I can't teach you how to have a sunny disposition if you're 35 years old and you're going to have somebody, you know, shut up and get the blankety blank on my bus because I'm in charge, versus, you know, a welcoming experience that helps determine the opinions, perception, and attitudes that will then yield to someone being a promoter. So to answer your question, we are going through that process. I just shared with my team today. I spoke to nearly 500 people in a virtual forum about what that will entail. And it's going to engage people leaning in, having those conversations, because, you know, you can speak with any frontline bus operator and they will tell you it's not just about driving the bus. In some instances, it's about basically being that constant steady in somebody's daily life, recognizing that if you're not there when you say you're going to be there, which is our commitment via schedule, that we're going to pick you up so you could punch in to get to your essential job. And if that doesn't happen, I'm impeding your livelihood. So when you talk about other agencies, I basically took part in this at my last agency, and just maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, I shared with my team in human resources. It was like, oh, do you enjoy engaging with people? Do you like to be out and about, not confined in an office setting? Do you, you know, those types of things. So that's why when you're asking the question, I'm smiling, because that's in the works. It's going to take us some time. And even in the job descriptions for administrative, it says that, why do I need to pick up 60 pounds? I'm not, I mean, you know, and in some instances, I have to tell you, having that language is not inclusive. It's very discriminatory.
Yeah.
Because as we know, individuals that may have mobility limitations or have other aspects of disabilities, they're perfectly capable of doing a job. We can provide a reasonable accommodation. And so it's limiting. And so that's what we're doing, going through. It's going to take some time. So I appreciate you broaching that.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, just backing up to the peer agency. One thing we've talked about a little bit on this committee, again, kind of a reimagine issue eventually, is technology. And since you were in the Bay Area, I was just there last week with my handy Clipper card.
Oh, yeah.
Bopping around between BART and San Francisco buses and stuff. And look, RTD's technology tends to be about 30 years out of date on a rolling basis. And I just wondering if that's a place you're going to look at peer agencies and best practices and try to get us a little bit more up to date, because I think it could make a big difference in our data collection and also in our ease of use for patrons.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Matt. One thing I will say, everything that glitters isn't gold. If you only knew, I'm just going to share this. We were testing the predecessor to the Clipper card, which was called TransLink back in the early 90s. I was able to go to BART, work at VTA in San Jose, go to Amada in DC, and come back, and we were still testing. And that it was about 10 years that it had elapsed. But, you know, recognizing with technology and transit agencies as a whole, as we go forward, we have to adhere to procurement practices as we're recipients of federal dollars. So we have to level the playing field and do solicitations so we're not limiting competition. So I want to give that to you just as a backdrop. But to answer your question, yes, we do need to step in the 21st century, and we are looking at accounts-based ticketing. There are conversations collectively that have ensued with our National Transit Association, and getting things all shored up, because there have been investments made. And these aren't to give excuses. I'm just letting you know we are looking at this as we go forward, but there is investment in the ticket vending machine equipment. I'll give you a quick story. When I first came here, probably about 6 months in, I was meeting with members of the team, and they said, we're looking to upgrade TVMs. And I said, why? And it was just like, okay, well, they're reaching their end of useful life. I said, but really, are people using that now? We want to use our phone, not to quote Capital, whatever the credit card is, Capital One, whatever's in your wallet. That's really what it's about, right? And so why are we limiting ourselves? And I asked them, I said, reach out to others, because I know specifically we did this here at X and we did this at Y. The team came back and said, you know what, Debra, that made total sense. Now we recognize that we do have a portion of our demographic that are unbanked. And public transportation, as I said before, I believe it to be the great societal equalizer. So we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our faces, because not everybody have access to that. So while it makes sense to utilize data to determine where a TBM might make sense, then let's do that. But in other instances, we can leverage other things going forward. So the team is collectively looking at about account-based ticketing as relates to the realm in which we're in. There's a couple of people that have a monopoly on, you know, the smart card technology, but that's even, you know, passe. And so we are assessing all of these opportunities as we go forward, because they're critical. And I can't say with certainty, but I would say it's highly likely that this will come up in the fair study and equity analysis. And that's why it's so important for us as we do outreach to look at varied customer segments, those that have limited English proficiency. That's why we're looking at the safe harbor languages within our region. There's 21 of them. That's why we're going to work with the customers with disabilities, with seniors, with youth, so we can determine what might be best and understanding those customer segments' pain points. Does that help? Okay. Anything further on that?
Debra, John Fusa again, just real and more a comment. Not knowing what the future holds for the agency and kind of transit and transportation in the region. If the agency does move through Reimagine and other discussions to, let's say, restructuring your service territory and your services and going to more partnerships, perhaps even with other transportation and transit providers, it worries me. One of the great strengths of having a unified regional transit district is that there's one entity. That's both a strength and a weakness. But it should make things like a uniform, consistent across the territory, fare structure and system easy, not easy, because none of this is easy to your point, but easier than when you have a fractured environment. Now, I don't come from the Bay Area. I come from the New York City metropolitan region. Mm-hmm. Would make me, and I lived in New Jersey. I take New Jersey Transit to Newark, New Jersey. I transfer to the Path. Mm-hmm. And so 2 fare cards. And then I'd go to Manhattan and I'd always have my Metro card, 3 fare cards. And it was I got where I had to go, but it was a terrible user experience. And so whether RTD stays along the same trend and track it's on, or if you go to a restructured service and territory with partners, all the customer cares about is having a seamless, easy, consistent user experience. And that's critical. I just want to, that just from the rider perspective, and I know you know this, but I just want to make that point.
No, and I appreciate that totally, because you're going to get me on my soapbox. It's like we all what we want, and it's fiefdoms, and no, this is my territory, and this, that, and the other, and I don't want to do this, and I'm trying. Who gives a flying fig? We can figure that out on the back end. To your point, the customer wants something seamless, and especially if we want people to get out of their cars and help reduce vehicle miles traveled. We can figure that out, and perhaps we'd leverage Dr. Cog as the MPO, and you could divvy up the money and discern who gets what. But I agree, and I've run into that problem everywhere I worked in the metro regions that I described, being, LA, Bay, and then DC Metro. It's the same thing. So yeah, it's easier said than done, getting people to all rally around and come up and say, okay, you're right. It should just, for discussion's sake, be $1. But no, this is costing me this, and I need to do this, and who's going to pay for that little plastic card? How much does that cost you? Freaking 10 cents? Then you want to charge somebody $2 for it?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to make the comment and your comments back.
Thank you. Hi, Andrea, you want to go ahead?
Just a quick comment that I found humorous, to say the least. The Easy Pass that they use in New Jersey can take you down the whole Eastern Seaboard. You don't need to have different cards for different states. And it goes into Pennsylvania. It's amazing. Just that one little box can take you all over the Eastern Seaboard.
Yep, you're absolutely right. It's like we're not reinventing the wheel. We can leverage lessons learned, as we go forward. But anyway, okay. So, I was saying that partnership opportunities challenge local levels. And, one thing I'll say, I think it's great. We're open to partnering as we go forward. The one thing that I'd be remiss not to state, as we are recipients of federal dollars, we have to ensure that we are adhering to the requirements specified by the Federal Transit Administration, meaning that we aren't discriminating against people. We're adhering to procurement practices and things of the like. So that's something in and of itself, but that doesn't bar us from not doing partnerships. It's like going forward, and what might that look like? And perhaps there's an opportunity from a regional perspective, because I know that the entities have reached out to us, and we've leveraged a partnership with one municipality or jurisdiction over here, and somebody says, what about me? So what I will share is that I've, convened a team of folks, and we're looking at this holistically. So we can talk about, okay, here's this pot of money that we have that we can leverage. You can put forward what the opportunity is before us, and that can be assessed, whether it's by us, by partnership with Dr. Cog. So there's level playing field, and everybody has the rules of engagement. So it doesn't appear as if we're getting preferential treatment to, X entity in this quadrant of the region or Y entity in that quadrant of the region. So these are things that we're exploring as we looked at the accountability recommendations coming forward. We recognize that there were things that were done, and I'm not here to point fingers and talk about what worked well or what not, because trust me, there'll be somebody else sitting in this seat in a few years thinking, what the hell was she doing? So I'm just saying, as we go forward, we're looking at this because I'm trying to do the best with what I have now to enhance that customer experience. Okay, so I'm going to answer this question because I know you guys want to know the update on the deal with CDOT in Boulder County regarding service in the Northwest Corridor. So I'm just going to be very straightforward with y'all because, we've all gotten to know each other and we're warm and fuzzy right now. So let's be honest, there's no deal to be had. Those monies as specified by the American Rescue Plan Act have qualified what those terms are for. And I will read this to you. This is the American Rescue Plan document that talks about what the funds are stipulated for. So all funds are available at 100% federal share. They're available for payroll and operations unless the recipient certifies that has not furloughed any employees. It's available for payroll for public transit providers, including private providers of public transportation, operating costs of public transit during the health emergency, including the purchase of personal protective equipment, administrative leave for operations or contractor personnel due to reductions in service, and it must be obligated by September 30th, 2024 and dispersed by September 30th, 2029. Recognizing the discussions we've had thus far, we have a shortage of employees. But first, let me say this. I've been in this space and I enjoy what I do, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be sitting here engaging with you all. Really, I am passionate about what I do. It's not a bunch of, smoke that I'm blowing. I really believe that I grew up taking public transportation, and it's enabled me to sit in this seat and converse with you today. So with that being said, it pains me that I cannot deliver the caliber of service this agency is intended to provide due to all the adverse impacts. All right. So with that, recognizing that there was a desire, and there are desires from everybody across this region, we want to have our service back. And I get that, but I don't have the people power. And I coined this with my team just the other day. I said, we have a new P3. It's called people power problem. And so that's where I sit right now. I have a people power problem issue, right? And so as we go forward with Boulder, let's be clear. I said these funds are reimbursable. So basically, you have to draw down on these monies and show what needs to happen. Now, we're working in partnership with Boulder County, but in order to be a recipient of federal dollars, there's a myriad of things that have to happen. And just so you all are clear, there's a couple of steps, like, we are the designated recipient for that urbanized area, and that's comprised by census data. I don't want to take you too far down in the weeds, but I just believe this context is important. And then, so what's been stipulated by the FTA with any of this, that the governor has to first provide a letter concurring with the addition of a direct recipient. That's just something that has to happen, and that has to go through the established metropolitan planning process, which would be DRCOG in this instance, as well as impacted cities, counties, and the transit agencies, and RTD is the designated recipient, as you're aware. Any grant application to utilize funds must include an explanation of how that $34.2 million in American Rescue Plan funds will be distributed for transit services in the UZA. And they have to cite the eligible projects. FTA must make a determination on any new grantee's financial and technical capacity to carry out a grant award before approving that grantee's application. Then it says, ARP funds may only be used for the operating and payroll, and I told you that up front. So the direct recipient would be responsible for meeting all FTA requirements, including grant administration, national transit data reporting, subrecipient monitoring, adhering to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, being service equity, Title VI, ADA, all of that. And it says it also be subject to FTA's triennial state management review and other oversight. If CDOT or any other entity becomes a direct recipient for future Section 5307 funds, it must follow the same process as outlined above. So the reason I give you that is that, yes, was there a deal struck? That's what the media said. There's no deal to be struck because these are dollars that we don't have. There are certain criteria as we go forward, but recognizing that we're talking about regional service that brings us full circle. When we talk about doing a service equity analysis, we're not just looking at the service that is in one person's backyard. We are a region. So you have people that are traversing this region. You have to look at origin and destination. You have to ensure that there's not a disparate impact or a disproportionate burden on communities of color and low income populations. So I say that I stand ready to help any partner as we go forward. But I would be remiss to say, having been in this space for all these decades and working with the federal government, this is not easy. Hence, that's why we have antiquated fair collection systems. That's why we're not as agile and nimble as we look to pivoting, trying to figure out what might be optimal to deliver transit service. But let me be clear, I didn't say that to say that we're not working with whatever entity going forward, but to the point that was raised, we are regional and we're talking about regional services. And simply put, as I've said in public forums, working with, colleagues from Boulder County and CDOT, and I said this to the governor as well, recognizing we have a people power problem, we're sourcing people from the same pool, so where are they coming from? So with that, it's 4 o'clock. I hope this was helpful. So I don't know, I'll yield the floor to you all real quick before I bid a fond.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Dawn, you have a quick question before Debra has to leave?
I don't know that it's quick, but I'm just going to throw it out there and you could tell me if it's premature or not. I just wanted to know, especially in light on the heels of all the financial discussion that you just shared with us, the new infrastructure bill, that $39 billion to modernize systems, to improve access to the elderly. And are we hatching good plans on how we could potentially secure some of that funding and utilize it to help our situation?
Well, first and foremost, quite naturally, that bill was just signed into law by the president and we work through the Federal Transit Administration. We have to receive guidelines. Just, the American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law March 11, 2021. And you guys are hearing discussions about what Boulder and RTD is doing in October of 2021. So it's going to take some time to shore up what is. But one thing's for certain is that we basically need to keep our assets in a state of good repair. And I'll use this analogy. Here we are in a house. Everybody wants to add on an additional room. We don't have a solid foundation. We have a dilapidated roof and a plumbing problem. We need to take care of our core structure before we add on an additional room. And so as we look at this holistically, we have a $290 million backlog in assets. We need to focus on that because, hey, we've done all this building and building and building 20 years ago. Now we're approaching, basically rehabilitating and maintaining. And so that's where the laser focus should be as we go forward. So thank you guys so much. Invite me back. I'll come and visit again.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Debra.
Thank you.
Okay, take
Thanks.
care. And thank
Thanks,
you for the
Debra.
comments. I appreciate y'all's time as well. All right, bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
That was wonderful, and that was a lot to absorb.
She's she's like the Energizer Bunny.
There you go.
Going.
Well, I hope we can have her come back again. We'll always find questions. She provides a lot of information, so that was wonderful.
Yeah, she was in some ways a lot more direct than I thought she would be. And I mean that in the best possible way. She didn't play political games with things, but really tried to answer our questions, which is refreshing. And I could have a longer conversation with her. Maybe next time we should kind of focus on 1 or 2 or 3 key areas where we could have a little bit longer conversation. But, for the first meeting, this was great.
I agree.
That is her personality. She's very direct in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I got to tell you guys, this issue about the operator shortage and all came up at the Reimagine meeting this morning, which I mentioned, and I raised the issue of wages and how competitive wages were, and the staff totally shut me down and said, we're in the midst of a CBA negotiation, can't talk about any of that stuff. And here Debra comes on and says, no, they're not competitive. And that was super refreshing.
Yeah.
And really impressive that she was willing to say that.
You mentioned it being a lifetime kind of job at one time, Ben, and I feel like pension jobs are kind of lifetime jobs, and I do think they still have a pension. And that's hard to come by in this day and age.
True.
Well, I think that's right. But you know, how it's funded and how strong it is, and you know, what the milestones are and how you vest, and those are all issues that I hope are part of the CBA and are being strengthened in order to make it much more attractive as a career type job.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Just in general?
One thing I didn't really want to bring up too much in that conversation. I think as a group, we're pretty hard on RTD's technology. But one thing I noticed just as a RTD customer and a transit rider nationally, I'm all over the place. I woke up in Arizona today and I'm back in Denver. But I feel like our mobile ticketing is way ahead of most places anywhere in the country. I mean, you open that RTD app, you can book your fare. It's really a nice interface that most agencies don't have around the country.
I don't know. I think others have it. And one thing for sure is, since it came up, it's maybe a little less relevant here since we are kind of the one transit agency, I suppose, is I'll go back to the Clipper card in San Francisco or in some other places around the world. But yeah, San Francisco has whatever, 25 agencies. Guess what? You can put all your passes from all those agencies onto one card, and you can get on the transit service from any one of those agencies with one card. And it refills itself automatically. Mine did, and it did it instantly. And the bus I was getting on knew about it instantly. Which RTD, I mean, we are decades behind in our usability as far as that technology goes. And you can use your phone to pay, and you can, you know, get more money on your cards using your phone and all of that stuff. Yeah, you do need to be aware of people who, for various reasons, can't use the technology, no question. I would never suggest otherwise, but I think there are ways to deal with that too. And there are agencies around the world where you have to use a card. And in London, it's the only way to do anything. You have to use a card. And they deal with people who have trouble with that somehow. So let's figure out how they do that. And let's learn from them. Other people have been there before we have. Stealing from other agencies, cool, let's do it. And she seemed open to that, but there's a lot of inertia in the system.
I would just add that if we end up creating more partnerships, you know, with, you know, first and last mile and stuff like that, upgrading our system could really create a much more cohesive environment to make it really simple for the user, you know, should we go down that path, which I think we should.
I have to disagree with something that Matt said. My daughter lives in England, and we always travel around London for a day or two before I leave. All I got to do is tap your smartphone to the entrance thing, and you don't need a card. You don't need anything but your phone. And I didn't even have it set up, but she said, "Mom, just touch your phone." And there it was. I got in, and it charged me.
Yeah, you can do that now. They have an Oyster card, as they call it, and you can do that in San Francisco as well with your phone. And you know, RTD does some of that stuff. And Debra's inherited an old system and kind of old technology. She said that, I get it, and it may not be the top thing on her list. But if you really want good data, on the one hand, the agency good data, and on the other hand, usability from the writer's standpoint, yeah, it's a big deal. You need to fix that problem. And I sure hope they work on that sooner rather than later. And maybe.
And they have to close the system.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, they've looked at closing the system, and it really doesn't work on light rail. And the cost, the analysis has been the cost to do that. There isn't that much fare evasion that it justifies.
But they don't know how much fare evasion there is.
Well, they do spot checks, and I think it's like a poll. You do it and then extrapolate how it's going.
Because I have seen kids booted off the train because they didn't have a ticket.
Yeah, this is Danny. Sorry, my internet's terrible, so I'm keeping my camera off. Yeah, on the train, I was sharing with somebody recently that it's been so long since somebody's done a fare check for my commute. And my commute's kind of long. I don't mind that, not complaining, but there's like no presence. And I actually brought it up because the mask requirement is kind of a joke. Like every time I'm on the train, there's somebody without a mask and they're like hacking up stuff. And I'm just like, you know what? No one really cares. There's no enforcement. And that reminded me that no one ever is on to do fare checks anymore. I mean, they might be somewhere, but it's not nearly as much as it used to be. So I kind of agree with Andrea, like, we don't really know. It's all supposition.
They only really fare check at like 9 and 5. So like, when people are getting on and off work, and then it's really annoying too, because it's like the people who really need the bus, or like the people who really need transit, are like the people who use the bus. And so when I was doing it, it's like the bus is a closed loop system, while the light rail, you can just get on and off at any point. Technically, I don't have to pay for anything if I'm on light rail, and guess who gets to afford the light rail? All the richer neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think RTD's decision to have a so-called open system, which is not uncommon in some places. You certainly see it in Europe, although frankly, I think the Europeans are more honest in a lot of ways than we are. I don't know. That was kind of a weird decision. And again, not only is it money, but it also means data collection is just kind of abysmal. And so how much is RTD really subsidizing the rail? Who the hell knows? They don't know either. And that's a big problem when you're trying to do a reimagine project and you're trying to base it on good data, and they don't have good data. And we've talked about that. And I don't know, it's something we should talk about some more, and maybe think about how we could make some recommendations along those lines. But boy, it'd be hard to retrofit now. That's for darn sure.
I will say, I think it's partially a staffing issue. So I live on the inline, and you will get fare checked on the inline. Like, they only have 3 trains, but the inline did a pilot where they don't use armed security guards. It's just like random high school and college kids pretty much to check fares on it. And so they always check tickets because they always have staffing, where I think the rest of the system, RTD says they have to carry a firearm. And so they can't get enough fare inspectors because not enough people want to carry a firearm with their job, right? And so some of it is, how do you structure the role of safety? You can have a person that just, I would assume violence against unarmed fare inspectors is actually really low, right? Or you just train them to de-escalate, like walk away, right? You don't need to put your life in danger, but doing that has a big presence that RTD maybe needs to lean into on that quicker rather than the current strategy, which is just not check fares because they're short-staffed on the security team.
Okay. Well, other things on the agenda?
Yes, tell us about the meeting schedule.
So we are going to stay on, I think, the 3rd Wednesday of the month. And I will just update and send out a calendar here in the next few days, just so that people have it. We'll also start working on, the other thing, I'm sorry, someone's yapping at my ear. The other thing I wanted to confirm is we are going to go ahead and have a December meeting because the legislators did confirm that they're available to meet with you all. And as we thought about it, it's much more like it would have been a crapshoot if we thought we could get them after they are back in session. So I will confirm that it should still be on your calendars. They're confirmed. That will be the only thing on the agenda. We may not last 2 hours, but wanted you to know that. And then the other announcement is
Roger, just one real quick question. Since we will have a December meeting, and it's great that you got the legislators, that's wonderful. That should be a really interesting conversation. But we had also maybe talked about a follow-up on the accountability committee. And I don't know if there is a follow-up in a way. I mean, RTD made a response. Maybe that's part of talking to the legislators since they kind of set the committee up. But has there been a response to the response, or is everything just kind of on a holding pattern right now?
Yeah, I will see if I can get, I don't know really who to ask that question to. I'll talk to Dr. Cog, and Faith will likely be able to answer that. But it is kind of interesting. They had this deadline that RTD had to respond by, but it's really not been clear. Okay, now what? If RTD said pound sand, would they have just said, okay, thank you, RTD, and moved on? I just don't know what the answer is to that. So I will let Faith know for sure that we want to hear, we'd like to hear some, and I'll also check with RTD. And I don't know, Ben, who else might have some information?
Yeah, I don't have anything. It certainly doesn't come up in the reimagined discussions, and I haven't heard anything. And no, I was curious, like Matt, where we go from here. I imagine they'll take it up, and Faith has got to be the one that can give us some guidance there. The legislature will take it all up again.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, RTD more or less agreed with most of the recommendations, although with some of them, it was, we'll get to it at some point. Of course, we made the same recommendation of some of these things, you shouldn't do this instant. Some of them are really tied into the FAIR study or into Reimagine or what have you. And there were a couple of things where RTD board kind of said no. So yeah, whose ball is the court in it? whose court is the ball in right now? And is the legislature going to do anything, or are they going to, okay, RTD, you were at least thoughtful about your responses, and that's great. I mean, I think RTD board was thoughtful about their responses, but yeah, so let's make sure we ask them that. And if there's anybody else who's the point person on this, maybe we could get that person as well.
Yeah, Dr. Cog helped facilitate, but I don't think they're in the middle now of facilitating anything beyond that. I think it does end up in the legislature's hands, but I'll definitely follow up, and we'll try to make sure the right people are also there. Okay. So, we've talked about December meeting. So just one other thing, CRL, our contract is up with RTD at the end of the year, and RTD has not put out a new RFP. So the CAC will be transitioning to Christina starting January 1. And at least that's the plan now. There may be a situation where we are extended for 2 or 3 months while they're doing the procurement. They're still working out what that procurement looks like. And as I understand it, they've had 3 senior procurement officers leave and retire. So it's just a function like everything else. Staffing is behind, and processing these things are behind. And there may or may not be a solution to fill that gap. So what I'm probably not going to send out a calendar invite for January until maybe we'll know in December a little bit more. And so that may come from Christina, just because it would be awkward if it came from me and then we're not here. And the same goes, I'm not going to start scheduling the 2-on-1 meetings until we have some clarity, and that probably will be in January. So just wanted to update you all on that front. I can also say I asked Debra directly. I had a meeting with her the other day, asked her directly about where she thought we were heading with in-person meetings. And I think it is certainly the board is going to continue to meet virtually well into next year, it looks like. And I think that is a function of their meeting room, just doesn't accommodate any kind of social distancing. They have looked into maybe some partitions among board members, but they haven't figured out how to accommodate the public. I think there is still like a very good likelihood they would continue to do virtual input for forevermore. It seems like even when and where the board starts meeting in person again, they have realized that virtual engagement actually encourages more people and will likely keep that. There is discussion about, can committees like yours, if we're in a large, like this committee could meet in the board room in the basement, and we could each have our own table and be spread out. So I've asked that question. Perhaps we'll have clarity here in the next month. But I know that Matt, every time we meet, Matt's preamble includes, I hope we'll be able to meet in person soon. So I just wanted to give you that update, that I am continuing to ask about that. My Wi-Fi looks like it's back up a little. So questions on any of that?
Well, so Roger, is it your sense that you're going to get a contract? It just hasn't been, kind of spec'd out and all that sort of stuff?
I mean, I don't know. I can't say that just yet. I mean, I think there's discussion within RTD about what the scope of work would include. And it has evolved over the years that we've been involved. And I think until that's clarified, that's one of the reasons there's a delay. And then, this happens, we always have to compete, and we're fine with that. So it'll depend on what the final scope looks like. And then hopefully it'll be something we would bid on and propose on and be selected, but you never know. I asked if they could select us for life, and apparently that is against the rules.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's hear from Barbara McManus. She may have more information than I have.
Hi, I don't have any additional information, but I, as the only representative on the call right now for RTD, would like to give kudos to Roger for all the work that he's done up until this point. We hope that we can continue working with him as we move forward. That all remains to be seen. But I would be remiss in not bringing forward the fact that he has been instrumental in working with this group, bringing many things forward. And I think we owe Roger a round of applause.
Can we do that on here?
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Time will tell with how it all shakes out, but Roger, thank you. I've attended many of these meetings. I've presented at these meetings in the past. There is a lot of value to the conversations and the subject matters that are brought forward. And I feel confident that however we move forward, this group will continue to be impactful to the agency. So thanks to all.
Yeah, so I agree, and I think Roger's done a great job for the committee, and I've known Roger for a long time, long before I got on this committee, through various other things I worked on. I just do want to make sure, especially if there's some transition, even if it's just an interim while everything gets sorted out, that, you know, we on this committee continue to have good agendas and kind of the right people come, and we're still in the loop. And we do indeed set up our 2-on-1 meetings with board members, which takes a little bit of logistical work and planning and, you know, contacting people and so on and so on. Because I sure would hate to see us kind of lose several months of our activities because there's some transition going on. Even if Roger does come back, we want to make sure we're still in a good place. So that's really the only request. Anything, you know, we can do, Joanna and I can do, happy to help out, but I think that's real important for this committee. We're kind of on a roll here, and we want to make sure we keep doing that.
Thank you. We are, there's lots of conversations going on. So we're trying to advise the best we can on what I think the scope should include and what perhaps it shouldn't include. We'll just see where RTD lands.
All right. Well, anything else from anybody that we need to take up or you're thinking about for future conversations or issues you might have? Anybody out there?
Matt and Roger, this is John Fusa. Just a quick question. Knowing that there may be a bit of transition and we'll have a holiday lull, hopefully Roger continues. My limited interaction with him has been terrific as a newcomer to the group. If we have, as members of the committee, Matt and Roger, if we have, I guess, thoughts or ideas for maybe topics we might wish to engage on in 2022, can we just send those on to both of you, one or both of you, for your review and consideration?
Absolutely.
Or, you know, and at some point, perhaps discussion with the bigger group.
Yeah, I think any input kind of for things moving forward, if you send them to me, I'm working on some sort of a transition plan. Like it's the little details, like if when you schedule those meals that we have, how do they get paid for? A contractor has more flexibility than if it's an RTD staff person. So there's, it's funny, all those little details start to become an issue when we're in a transition period like this.
Yeah, so for folks in this committee, I mean, we frankly have normally just counted on Roger to kind of get the input and pass it along, and Joanna and I chat with him every month and makes our life easy. But given that there may be some sort of transition here, yeah, I think send information to Roger and to Joanna and to me, and that way, hopefully it won't fall through the cracks. Find out.
And we get your email addresses. That's what I was thinking in case of emergency. We should have your email address.
You should have all of our bios and the contact information. You should have email.
I don't think I do.
Well, I can send you the contact sheet again. Let me get Jim's material put on, and it includes some updates that folks have sent me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You should have emails and phone numbers for Joanna and for me, as well as Roger. And yeah, I think in the meantime, at least through the end of the year, send things to all three. And then when we find out what the heck's going on in the beginning of next year, well, we'll see where it goes. But if it gets to me or if it gets to Joanna, we will certainly try hard to make sure it gets to the right.
I think there is concerned that there's going to be a gap here. It seems, knowing how contracting works, it seems like it's hard to imagine how not to see a gap after at the first of the year. Of course, we'd love to keep working with you, Roger, but there may be a little space in there, so we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, they may do some temporary extension. I mean, I think we'll be okay for a little bit. We've got our agendas for the next first couple of months, et cetera, but obviously we need to know how this is gonna out and what that means for us. So, it's the first I've heard of it, so I guess we'll see. We'll talk to Roger certainly at our regular little conference call in December, and he may know a little bit more by then, and we'll keep everybody up to date.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Roger.
All right, well, we'll talk to everyone on December 15th. Again, I think it worked well having questions to give to Debra in advance. So if you all want to think through and send me anything that you have as far as what you'd like Faith and Matt to address, I do think this is an opportunity, and if we give it to them in advance, hopefully we have a little more detail in the responses that we might hear from them.
Good idea.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea. And those you can definitely send to Roger, because he was at that time. We know that. Well, okay, everybody, have a great Thanksgiving holiday.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to
All right, we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.